e5 is a common response that establishes a presence in the center, controls d4, and opens up the queen and dark squared bishop. Knight f3 develops the knight toward the center, attacks the e5 pawn, and prepares to castle. Knight c6 develops the knight toward the center, protects the pawn on e5, and eyes the d4 square. The Ruy-Lopez opening develops the bishop to immediately attack the knight on c6, the lone defender of the e5 pawn. a6 forces the bishop to decide exchange or retreat. Bishop a4 safely retreats the bishop while keeping pressure on the knight. Knight f6 attacks the undefended e4 pawn and develops the knight at the same time. Castling gets the king out of the center and prepares to develop the rook to e1. Bishop e7 develops the dark squared bishop and prepares to castle. Rook e1 centralizes the rook and protects the e4 pawn. b5 gains space on the queen side and forces the bishop to the b3 square. Bishop b3 is forced, but the bishop is well placed because it attacks the f7 square. d6 defends the e5 pawn and allows the light-squared bishop to develop. c3 prepares the d2-d4 pawn break and clears the c2 square for the light-squared bishop. Castling gets the king out of the center and activates the rook. h3 prevents black from developing the light-squared bishop to g4, which would pin the knight and make it hard for white to play d4. Knight b8 retreats the knight in order to relocate it to d7. Black plans to fianchetto, the light-squared bishop on b7, and doesn't want the knight to block it on c6. d4 attacks the e5 pawn, controls the center, and opens the diagonal for the dark-squared bishop to develop. Knight bd7 develops the knight toward the center, defends the e5 pawn, and keeps the a8-h1 diagonal open for black's light-squared bishop. Knight bd2 develops the knight toward the center and protects the e4 pawn. Bishop b7 puts the bishop on the long diagonal in a move called a fianchetto. Bishop c2 retreats with the bishop to defend the e4 pawn. Rook e8 moves the rook to a central file and frees the f8 square for black's pieces. Knight f1 maneuvers the knight toward the king side and prepares to play either knight e3 or knight g3, while also opening the diagonal for the dark-squared bishop. Bishop f8 retreats the bishop to defend the king side and unblock the e-file. Knight g3 activates a knight and overprotects the e4 pawn. g6 prepares to fianchetto, the dark-squared bishop to g7, where it will sit on the long diagonal. The bishop joins the board early, building a strong opening for white. The bishop is kicked by a pawn and must now move or be captured. This moves the bishop to safety. This develops the bishop and gives it scope on the long diagonal. Solid. Continuing with standard opening theory. This is not the right idea. This is the strongest option. Very precise. That's fine. Only one move worked there, and this wasn't it. The bishop finds a new active square. That's not a mistake, but it's not the best move either. This connects the rooks, which helps them work together. Right on target. White activates the last piece, bringing all pieces into play. This mobilizes the knight, allowing it to control more of the board. This doubles the rooks on a file, which allows them to team up to create threats. This connects the rooks, which helps them work together. This is a fair move. The piece finds a new active square. That's fine. A very strong play. This threatens to tactically win a knight. This stops the opponent from being able to tactically win a knight. One of the best moves. This moves the bishop to a better location, allowing it to control more squares. White's knight has moved to a square with greater activity and control. A solid choice. The knight is not as active as before on this square. This misses an opportunity to develop a rook off its starting square. Takes back. This wins a bishop. This move puts the bishop on a safer square. After all captures, this is an equal trade. This threatens to capture a pawn and win material after the follow-up trades. This misses an opportunity to kick a bishop. This is the strongest option. That's not a mistake, but it's not the best move either. White still has an advantage, but they no longer have a winning position. This maintains the balance in material with a good trade. Recaptures. This fights against the other rook for the open file. This move challenges Black's king's safety. A very strong play. This wins material. This overlooks an opportunity to kick a bishop. Takes back. This kicks a bishop. This loses a knight. White was better off, but now their position is winning. White can win a pawn using a fork with the right follow-up. The pawn is now adequately defended. This is the only move that works. This evades the check from the queen. This overlooks a better way to centralize a knight so it controls more squares. This permits the opponent to eventually win a pawn. That pawn was free for the taking. Very precise. This is the only good move. This moves the knight to safety. This is a fair move. This is the only move that works. This move puts the bishop on a safer square. This is the only good move. This blocks the check from an opposing bishop. After all captures, this is an equal trade. Recaptures. The bishop finds a new active square. That was a free pawn. This mobilizes the knight, allowing it to control more of the board. That pawn capture will win material after all trades are complete. This wins time by threatening a queen and forcing it to move away. This wins a knight. This threatens to force eventual checkmate.